हेलो हेलो टेस्टिंग। अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अच्छा, लाइव आ रहे हैं ठीक है यूट्यूब पे। मैं लिंक सबको शेयर कर लूँगा इंशाल्लाह। आज जो है तुम इसमें सबको मारेंगे। अच्छा, आप लोगों ने जो है ना रिस्क फ्री ट्रेड लेनी है, ठीक है, कोई जो है ना ज़्यादा रिस्क नहीं लेना, ठीक है। अच्छा, मैं अपने ग्रुप में भी शेयर कर लेती हूँ। किसका कोई क्वेश्चन है तो वो पूछ सकते हो, ठीक है। किसका भी कोई क्वेश्चन है कहाँ से देखते हैं इसको तो फिर मैं ऐसे टोकन है यहाँ पे, ठीक है। कुछ रुपये फिलहाल मैं ये सब कुछ बता देता हूँ। अच्छा देखो, FOMC में मैंने जो है यहाँ पर लिक्विडिटी बना ली, ठीक है। आपको नजर आ रहा होगा, मैं FOMC में बता देता हूँ, ठीक है। अब हमारे पास आ सकते हो, ठीक है, क्योंकि इसमें भाई साहब की जो है ना लिक्विडिटीज़ लेने शुरू हो गई। सबसे पहले तो इसमें यहाँ पर बना, ठीक है। अभी ये ले देना, ठीक है, साथ साथ में तकरीबन अभी हमारे अभी भी टाइम है, ठीक है। तो आप लोगों ने जो है ना एक चीज़ ख्याल रखनी, ठीक है। प्लीज़ आपको आप लोगों के पास ये लिक्विडिटी है, ठीक है, तो ये लिक्विडिटी आपकी यूज हो सकती है, ठीक है। मतलब ये पहली दफ़ा जो है ना आपका बाई में आ सकते हैं। लेकिन इसमें ठीक है, बाई की जो लिक्विडिटीज़ थी काफ़ी हद तक बहुत ज़्यादा ये भी है, ठीक है। अब इसका जो प्रेफर होगा ना वो सेम होगा, ठीक है। तो अब हमें से जो है FOMC सेल में आ सकती है, ठीक है। तो थोड़ी देर तक मैं चीज़ ऑफ कर लेता हूँ, ठीक है। कुछ टाइम तक थोड़ा सा ये माइक वगैरह मैं ऑफ करता हूँ, ठीक है। इंशाल्लाह मैं जब ट्रेड पे आऊँगा तब इंशाल्लाह ट्रेड करेंगे, ठीक है, साथ में। अच्छा सबसे पहले तो देखो, आप लोगों को मैं एक चीज़ बताऊँ, ठीक है, ये मेरा अकाउंट है, ठीक है, कॉपी ट्रेडिंग का अकाउंट है, ठीक है, $100 का अकाउंट है, बाकी जो है ना कॉपी ट्रेड है मेरे पीछे हो गया, ठीक है, इंशाल्लाह इसमें ट्रेड लगेगी आपको शो होगी, ठीक है। उसके अलावा ये आपको जो है ना सेटअप मैं अपना दिखा रहा हूँ, ठीक है, बाकी टीम मैनेजमेंट हो रही है पीछे, ठीक है। ये जो है मेरे पास डेटा है, यहाँ पर डेटा डायरेक्ट मैं देखूँगा, यहाँ पर जो है मुझे जो है ना मूव वगैरह देखने को मिलेगा, मेरा एनालिसिस होगा। अच्छा, अब आप लोगों ने जो है ना एक चीज़ ध्यान में रखनी है, ठीक है, गोल्ड का चार्ट, ठीक है। अब आप लोगों ने देखनी है ना कि देखो, ये लिक्विडिटीज़ थी, ये पिक हो गई, ठीक है, बाकी ऊपर और लिक्विडिटीज़ थी, यहाँ पर लिक्विडिटीज़ थी, यहाँ पर लिक्विडिटीज़ थी, संगाई साइड में जो लिक्विडिटीज़ थी वो जो है ना पिक हो गई, ठीक है। और अभी जो है ना मूव सेल साइड में आ सकता है, ठीक है, लेकिन ऊपर जो है ना आपको कैसे इशू आ रहा है, तो नेट का थोड़ा बहुत इशू है, अभी तो नहीं क्या है। अच्छा, अब यहाँ पर जो है सेल साइड में मूव आ सकती है क्योंकि ये सारी लिक्विडिटीज बन गई, ठीक है, लेकिन सेल साइड में तब आएगा क्योंकि ये बाई की लिक्विडिटी बन गई है, ठीक है, बनी है, ठीक है। तो इंशाल्लाह अभी देखते हैं, क्योंकि हमारी स्ट्रेटजी भी आपको पता नहीं चलेगी अभी के टाइम। ये तकरीबन गालिबन ये तकरीबन होगी कोई 100 पिप्स पे होगी, ठीक है, 70 पिप्स पे होगी। तो आपने जो है इस चीज़ को भी देखना है, हर एक चीज़ को लाजमी अपने ज़हन में रख लेना। अरे लाइफ था नहीं वहाँ। अच्छा। हम्म, अच्छा, तो किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन हो ना तो वो पूछ सकते हैं, ठीक है। अभी 10 मिनट रहते हैं, ठीक है। इंशाल्लाह 10 मिनट के अंदर हम लोग ट्रेड लगाएंगे। हमारे साथ बेसिकली जो है ना, हम लोग लगा रहे हैं, हमारी तो अपनी स्ट्रेटजी है, तो हम लोग उसी के बेस पे चलते हैं। किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है ना तो देखो, मैंने आपको बताया था कि ये लिक्विडिटी आपकी पिक होगी, ठीक है, और ये लिक्विडिटी आपकी पिक होने जा रही है। यार असल में मेरे साथ हेडफोन्स हैं नहीं, ठीक है, तो मसला ये है कि इसलिए मेरी वॉइस सही नहीं आ रही। मसला ये कि मेरे साथ हेडफोन्स नहीं है, तो बेड लक है। रैम 5 है लिक्विडिटी से। M15 पे आपकी लिक्विडिटी जो है ना वो स्वीप हो रही है, ठीक है। यहाँ की ये लिक्विडिटी थोड़ी सी रहती है, और ये जो है ना तकरीबन स्वीप हो गई है, ये वाली स्वीप हो गई है, और ये जो है ना आपकी स्वीप हो जाएगी उसके साथ ये वाली भी। हम्म, गया गया। हाँ हाँ। हाँ यार। M15 बंदे इसे M15 बंदे खबर हो रहा था देखो पोस्ट या लिक्विडिटी तो दाइने दाव दागा लिक्विडिटी आ दो टाइम से हमारा पोते दार क्या खुशता था टाइम स्टा था। मेरी टीम इंशाल्लाह बैकअप में है, ठीक है, इंशाल्लाह वो बैकअप दे रही है। Zeka zowie kana ce palaisal cikin na kana na yawaz वो टीपी आ मैंने सोता तखपला जगह चिदा पोस्ट मोमेंट वेर कवाइशी छोटा सा मोमेंट ऊपर की तरफ आ सकते हैं, ठीक है। मैं आप लोगों को पहले भी बता चुका हूँ, ठीक है। मेरी वॉइस अच्छी की तरह नहीं आ रही है आप लोगों की तरफ, क्योंकि वो मसला है कि मेरे साथ हेडफोन्स नहीं है। हेडफोन्स होते तो मसला नहीं होती। पूछता ना कि लिक्विडिटी लेवल्स की। देखो आपके अच्छा मुदस्सिर भाई ने क्वेश्चन पूछे लिक्विडिटी। सबसे पहले हम लोग M15 पे आ जाते हैं। M15 पे मैं आपको लिक्विडिटीज़ बताता हूँ। एक तो ये लिक्विडिटीज़ है, ठीक है। एक आपके पास ये है, ठीक है, बाई साइड में। तो बाई साइड में अगर मूव आ सकती है तो यहाँ तक, मतलब 55 तक आ सकती है, ठीक है। ये आपकी लिक्विडिटी लेवल है। बाकी जो है ना ऊपर इतनी ज़्यादा लिक्विडिटीज़ नहीं है, लेकिन नीचे आपके पे लिक्विडिटीज़ बहुत हैं। फेयर वैल्यू गेट्स भी है और लिक्विडिटीज़ भी बहुत है। तो सेल में आपका मूव बहुत आ सकती है। देखो ये सारी लिक्विडिटीज़ है, ठीक है, आपको नज़र आ रहे हैं ना। ये भी लिक्विडिटी है, ये भी लिक्विडिटी है, ये फेयर वैल्यू गेट्स है। तो आपका नीचे जो है ना आ सकता है, ठीक है। सो बेस्ट ऑफ लक फॉर योर ट्रेड। और तकरीबन 3 मिनट रह गए।
Productivity payoff may be further out. So in your judgment today, is AI adding more to demand or to supply?
It's a good question. At the central bank in an economics profession, what we spend most of our time doing is counting demand. It's easier. We can see it, we can count it, we can check it, we can revise it. What we do, though, is we infer supply. You'll notice in the second paragraph of what one of your colleagues described as a very short statement, we have a sentence on the demand side and a sentence about the same length on the supply side. They're both important. Just because we can count one better than the other doesn't mean we're going to favor one more than the other. With respect to AI and the growth of data centers and infrastructure around it, we're counting the demand side, and it is no doubt showing up in GDP figures. We can be less certain when we infer the timing and extent of the growth in the supply side. It may well be an intuition the supply side is going to expand, but it'll take longer. I just describe it this way. There's a race between supply and demand. Milton Friedman says that the only thing we know about economics is that there's a supply line and a demand line they ultimately cross. When they cross and what are the implications for policy? The good news for you is we have a task force for that.
Andrew.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It sounded like on the task force on data that you were looking at overhauling or completely overhauling the system of national accounts, the way the government mines the economy. Is that your ambition?
In a word, no. In a few words, much of this data gathering happens in other government agencies to which we owe a tremendous amount of respect, tremendous amount of deference. But if in the course of this we come up with recommendations, which Fed staff have already begun to develop, about things that they could be doing to help inform us as policymakers, we're not going to hesitate. Again, I don't want to try to delineate the four corners of the research of the task force on data, but I do think there will be a review of official statistics, and at least as important, a view of bringing the best practices from the private sector and new analytical tools made possible by AI so we can forge these into a fabric that gives us better real-time information. So as I mentioned before, when we're making decisions that we'd say are real contemporaneous data, not data that we call contemporaneous, that's really an echo of history.
Okay, thanks. The other question I wanted to ask is related to the building renovations. Are you considering any changes to the renovations, the projects, just in light of the fact that they became kind of a political football in the last year?
I heard something about that. I don't think I'm breaking any news, but my view, when you show up at a new institution, you should go meet with the Inspector General, just as a matter of good practice. It's a practice that I hope to continue. I've had one meeting with the Inspector General, and he told me what I believe the world knows, which he'll be coming out with a report on the building and the building projects at some point later this summer. I'll be interested in reading the report. From my perspective, with a forward-looking glance, is there anything that we can be doing or should be doing from this moment until the completion of the project to do what we can to be good stewards of taxpayer money and make sure that we're delivering on the promises that we made. Some more work to do. You might not be surprised in the first few weeks. I've been somewhat preoccupied on other matters, but I promised to get to the full breadth of the Fed's tasks in the weeks ahead.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. So I know that you did not submit a forecast, but you are the person who is authorized to speak on behalf of the FOMC. So I'm wondering if you could tell us in the SEP, the increase in the expectations for inflation, is that all because of the Iran war? What was the discussion around what the expectations for inflation being higher and also potentially growth being slower? So
my read of what I heard in the room reflected, I must admit, in the SEPs, is half of my colleagues thought the policy rate, given all those developments, should be at this level or lower between now and year end, and the other half thought higher. That 19th voter was me, and I didn't submit one. There's a range of views on the questions of first and second round effects, no resolution or conviction, but we'll be meeting again in 6 weeks. I think we're going to know more then, and I think that my colleagues are very attentive to incoming developments between now and then.
And can I just quick follow up on the SEP? You said that you're still encouraging your fellow committee members to submit forecasts even if you're not doing it. So what do you think is the benefit of them doing it even if you don't?
That's the commitment that the FOMC made, and it's a commitment that I hope we live up to. Commitment we made was to deliver price stability. I expect us to live up to it. By the time we get to the end of this year, as I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a new communications framework. There were some changes to the SEP. That's a committee discussion, a robust discussion. I think we'll have it. I believe we're going to come to a better mix of communications to deliver on what we promised, but I wouldn't want to prejudge what those are. But between now and then, I would continue to expect colleagues to submit their SEPs. Some of them, I think, believe that the practice is currently structured is okay, but I heard a lot of interest in real reform, generally about all these topics. You didn't ask it, but I'll answer. It was a pretty gracious couple of days, and it's been a pretty warm few weeks. The institution wants to figure out how we can do better. The institution's going back to first principles, and I'm encouraged that what we've done in the statement, what we're thinking about doing with respect to the SEP, that instinct towards a new chapter is a real one, and by the end of the year, I hope we can put some points on the board, both in form and in substance of delivering.
Go to Enda for the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Curran, Bloomberg News. Could you guide us through, please, some of the principles that guide your own reaction function, and tell us a little bit about the kind of conditions that you think when the Fed should respond?
It's going to be a very unsatisfactory answer to the final question. The Federal Reserve has a lot of responsibilities, not just in monetary policy, but in supervision and regulation, consumer affairs and payments. My own view is our credibility comes from delivering on what we're saying we're going to do across everything we do. I've devoted more time in my first 3 weeks to monetary policy than all those things. But the more we deliver on our promises as good supervisors and good regulators, the more benefit we get, the more credibility enhancement we have in monetary policy. When we deliver on our price stability objectives, which we will, the American people will feel as though the hardships that they've been living through, in part because of inflation in the last 5 years, are in the rearview mirror, and that credibility will have dividends across what we do, and the institution will come to press conferences like this, always with an impetus to reform, always with an impetus to do better, but we're going to put some points on the board.
Mr. Chairman, strong labour data in recent months. How would you sum up the labour market right now? Do you see it as stable and as potentially a source of inflation? Thank you.
Yeah. So the committee, if I were to try to capture how the committee thought about it, the committee thought that the labor markets were stable. There were some people around the committee who thought that it was trending better for years. In January, the Fed, including the strategy that we're still bound by, the Fed statement says that inflation is primarily determined by monetary policy. You bet it is. I've said for years inflation is a choice. You bet it is. And today I'm announcing that this committee unambiguously and unanimously have decided we are going to deliver on that. The rest of your questions sounded like an encouragement for me to give forward guidance. We've dropped forward guidance. Some along the committee, I think, dropped it, I suspect, from our discussion the last couple of days, because they said at this moment in time, it doesn't feel as though providing forward guidance is right. Others have, I'd say, different views and think as a general proposition, forward guidance isn't the business we should be in. But that'll be taken up by the Task Force on Communications and my policymaker colleagues. We're going to listen hard to what the experts say and make our own decision. But I can't give any forward guidance about what we're going to do next. The good news is we'll be meeting in 6 weeks.
So just following up, I guess, on the current policy settings, then I am curious how restrictive you think things are at the current moment, given the flow of data that we've seen and, forecasts that are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I've heard characterizations both inside and the Fed about that. I'll give you my own. It's uneven. If I look at the housing markets as one example, Fed policy isn't the single determinant of the state of the housing market, but broadly I would say Fed policy appears to be somewhat restrictive. I would have a hard time managing to say those words if I were to see what's happening in financial markets. So I'd say it's uneven. That's perhaps a function of different transmission mechanisms of monetary policy, whether monetary policy is coming from our interest rate tool or our balance sheet tool. But the good news, we have a task force on that too, and the balance sheet task force will be looking more at that subject.
Mike McKee.
You said you don't like forward guidance. You dropped it from the statement this time. But with the dot plot, 9 members suggested that they want a rate increase by the end of the year. And the markets have taken that as forward guidance. So what does this mean in terms of how you guide the markets and in terms of what the dot plot's future is?
I'm going to have to give you the same answer I gave to Ms. Smith. We've got a task force for that. I'll give you a little bit more. I reviewed the dot plots, and when I saw the submissions, I noted that all the submissions were coming in with pencils, those kind with the big erasers. That's to say that I think my colleagues around the table, when they submitted their dots, understand the world is changing quite quickly. And they didn't feel bound by them 6 weeks from now or 6 days from now in the event that their circumstances change. I'll note a couple other things. What I heard around the table was, as they submitted their modal forecasts, to be clear, this was more likely than not. This was more likely than their other scenarios. So I didn't